right, we are live.
Cool.
Cool. Hey everybody. This panel for the hackathon. Quick thing. The hackathon is on hackathon mission week. Right now. .com. Excited for our panel today. I'm joined by from and Maddie from to investing. And so just to kick it off, Maddie, a brief introduction on yourself and a little each of your firms.
Sure. I can go first, and Maddie, I guess you go after. Cool. There might be a little bit of a delay, but hey everybody, my name is Chris McCann. I'm one of the general partners of Race Capital. We're focused on all things on the infrastructure layer broadly across Web 2 and Web 3. So anything around data infrastructure, transaction systems, developer tools, financial infrastructure. This is really the stuff that we fall in love with. And then the things we're probably most notable for is I was the very first seed investor for Solana when Rajan and Anatoly were literally starting the company. We were the lead seed investor for FTX when Sam Bankman was starting the exchange. And within the Solana ecosystem, we're the lead seed investors for Saber, Zeta, Solend, Allbridge, and a handful of others that are not announced. One, unfortunately, is announcing today, but is not announced. I probably won't steal their thunder, but we've been super long supporters of everybody in the Solana ecosystem.
We kind of lost Ben.
Yeah, do you want to go, Maddie? I think we might have lost him.
Yeah. So I'm Matti from Z Prime. I guess a partner, co-founder. We started investing in as Z Prime in crypto in early 2019. We're pretty early into DeFi, but we're generally, I would say, theme agnostic in crypto. So we're not like DeFi only investors. I would say recently more not DeFi than DeFi. Again, infrastructure, we're pretty known for our middleware thesis that it's out there. We were also lucky enough to be early investors in, among other things. We are also, I would say, ecosystem agnostic. Happen to be co-founders of a Polkadot based project or substrate project as well. We supported and invested in projects in the Solana ecosystem as well. So we're pretty much agnostic. I wouldn't say opportunistic. We're very early into the multi-chain, cross-chain narrative. So yeah, very much this is a positive sum game. So yeah.
Cool. I was just gonna say, I think we lost our moderator. I'm happy to. I have some of his questions, so I'm happy to kind of.
Oh, you have, because I don't.
Okay.
He's having a couple of technical issues, so Chris, why don't you moderate briefly, and he'll be back shortly.
All right, it's gonna be weird to try to do both at the same time, but we'll try. Yeah, I think Matt had. The state of Solana DeFi today looks to be about sort of 8 billion in TVL, with some of the top apps being on the lending side, Solend, trading side, Serum, liquid staking side, Marinade Finance, kind of the liquidity network, Saber, Quarry, and Sunny. I would kind of all group together if it was me personally. A lot of the foundational DeFi primitives look to be built kind of within the Solana ecosystem. So let's start with like a broader question. I guess, Mandy, like, what do you think the most exciting developments in Solana DeFi are today? And conversely, like, what do you think are some areas that need more development? And I guess I'll let you answer first, and then I guess I'll answer it for myself too afterwards.
I don't know. I don't want to be too specific. I mean, we obviously are investors in some of the projects Solana. I would say that generally that would probably be, you could apply it to broader ecosystems, not just Solana. I think that for Solana, it's important to kind of the growth was big for the last couple of 6 months. And I would just say that we see some of the market leaders being established, but I think I still think it's too early. I still think that there have been a lot that has been released, but not that much has been, I would say, proven so far. It's still pretty early, and I would say that every single game from Dexes, so very simple primitive, to a very complicated structured products like Friction. It's still too early to say what is exciting and what is not. I would say everything is exciting at this stage because it's pretty too vague. It's probably too vague, but I think it's still too early. So I'm pretty curious to see the developments in the more difficult structured products, I'd say, and then be able to compare it to other ecosystems, to other chains, and to see what the trade-offs are and what would be the best kind of product for Solana DeFi. Although I think that everything that has been done on ETH or on Polkadot and is done on Ava or whatever is being developed on Solana, but I still think that we don't know what is going to be the biggest fit for Solana DeFi at this stage.
Yeah, and I guess on my side, like I'd answer it in sort of three parts. One, similar to you, I think a lot of the basic building blocks are built, but now is the time to kind of see more products and things kind of constructed on top. For example, on the option vaults, we see sort of simple sort of option vault with covered call selling or covered put selling. But like I'd love to see sort of more exotic things built on top, things potentially with leverage attached to them or lending or directional moves or even volatility damping vaults themselves. I think this concept can be far more generalized and people can play around with a lot more of this. And would love to see this kind of in the upcoming sort of Riptide hackathon. The second way I'd answer this is while it is still super early days, kind of looking forward, if you will, a lot of the SOL itself is still sort of locked within simple staking. The vast majority of it is still not even within DeFi itself. So I would look for other areas where you can get people who are just simple staking to get to do things with it. And in that scenario, it actually might not be the most risky or craziest things. It actually might be slightly more conservative strategies. But I kind of look for that as like the more kind of immediate sort of growth area. And then outside of that, to your point, Maddie, like really looking multi-chain. If you look at all the assets across all the ecosystems, not just the Solana side, there are a lot of assets outside of the ecosystem. One interesting one in the Solana space is, for example, in the Terra ecosystem, you actually don't really see a lot of options vaults or anything in that ecosystem. So for example, the one on Friction, the option vault that they did around Terra Luna is super interesting because you're getting people to kind of bridge over from another ecosystem, use this within Solana, and it's kind of a net new product that really doesn't exist sort of today, at least within that ecosystem. So things like that are kind of far more interesting to me because again, you're really sort of crossing and bridging the divide between the two. And then last but not least, while a lot of the basics have sort of been built out and the treasuries are kind of being established and all that, I'd really love to see kind of more emphasis put on the governance side, not just the kind of voting and snapshot and windows, but really thought more around the organization, the communication channels. Discord is not always a perfect medium for stuff like this. While it's not DeFi specifically, I do think it touches a lot of the things that people are working on in this space and how these things are actually constructed. So I think there should also be a lot more attention kind of given towards around the ecosystem, not just the pure financial primitives themselves.
So maybe I could just throw a question back at you. So if you compare it to other things, like to other ecosystems, and if you try to project the current SOL narrative of high throughput chain, what do you think are the specific DeFi applications or financial applications that could be built on Solana and would be much more efficient than on the other layer ones?
Yeah, This is a super interesting question and something like we've been spending a lot of time on ourselves too. Like right now, I think you've seen a lot of the basics ported over. So like lending markets or the liquidity markets. But the broader question is like what makes Solana super really special, unique, and like what's areas that you don't necessarily see in other spaces. This is far newer, so I have a few ideas and examples and things we've seen here. Although honestly, I don't have all the answers. So people building these things in the Riptide hackathon, I'd love to talk to you. Please DM me. Like this is like at least to me the far more interesting areas. But maybe to throw out two examples in there. One, not a new idea, but I think a new mechanism is really around NFTs and DeFi. Within the Solana space, if you fractionalize things or indexes or whatever into smaller sort of fractional units, you have a lot more freedom and experimentation around the distribution of those fractions too. For example, NFT staking or sort of distributing for holding or any of that. Like another NFT project I'm involved with in the Solana space is a thing called Playground. We did the waves in Epoch. We took one of the waves, fractionalized it, and distributed it back to all the holders. And I think the amount, it wasn't big. It was like 0.01 or maybe 0.2 Sol or whatever. And we distributed that back to 1,000 sort of users in total. This would like literally be impossible on the Ethereum network because again, you'd be spending 1,000 times X gas transaction fee. It just wouldn't make economical sense to do it. Versus, for example, in the Solana ecosystem, you can play around and experiment and do things like this, which have a lot more sort of freedom of expression in the beginning. TBD on what this ultimately leads to, but I think that's one example. And then another one, which I think we're going to talk about later, is really around like the Solana Pay side. So not so much sort of any of the sort of existing sort of DeFi concepts, but even just using a lot of the mechanisms we already built for real world or virtual payments. So think like USDC or even UST or other synthetic stable coins, being able to purchase things either in the real world, like a cup of coffee. I went to the Redwood City coffee shop. I think it's called the I'm forgetting the name of the coffee shop. But I actually bought like a cup of coffee like with USDC inside a Phantom wallet. It was a really cool kind of experience, kind of end to end. And then I actually think we're going to see this also parlay into kind of more merchant web-based stuff as well, with sort of typical transactions being formulated in this. In my opinion, this really cuts across also the DeFi space too. And these are just, again, two smaller examples of things that I think are far more kind of net unique. But Maddie, I know I just kind of gave a bunch of examples. I'd love to sort of hear your thoughts on the same kind of question as well.
I have been asking this question myself, not just specifically, but in general, even a year ago, and I still don't have the answer. And I think that it's going to take some time to see where the dust settles, what kind of applications will be adopted and will favor, these kind of fundamentals this particular L1 offers. But I was simultaneously asking myself about stuff beyond DeFi and whether Solana will be, just given that the sheer amount of throughput, whether it's designed for DeFi or it's designed for other Web3, for lack of a better word, use cases, or for some more complex, I would say more idiosyncratic things than just finance, but that can be also a pretty complex itself. But I don't have any, it's tough to make predictions. I think that in a year's time it could be completely different because these things flip very quickly, and especially with the bull market, a lot of euphoria fades, and then suddenly I don't even know how much of TVL on what early stage project is really generic and how much is sort of committed from the seed deals and etc. So I don't know what's the organic liquidity on each of the project. Especially in the projects that are not sort of, let's say, bootstrap, but they're more like funded. So I think that it's very early to make judgment, but I definitely see some. I was pretty impressed, for example, with the Friction team. We're not even invested, but I think that some of the mechanics that they've taken advantage of are probably superior in comparison to what is designed on other chains at this moment. But that could also stem just from the creativity of the founders than just, just the fundamental mechanics allowed by the layer one that they're using. So
Yeah.
I don't have any good answer.
Yeah, well, a few other things that they're out there, like on the Solon guys, like they implemented isolated staking pools, which they're doing with kind of the basic stuff to start with, like kind of other of the major assets or other of the stable coins. But they're actually experimenting moving towards isolated lending pools around NFT assets, which again, I think this crossover, you actually see far more innovation and experimentation kind of in this space rather than sort of some of the other ones out there. So again, I think a lot of these newer concepts do take time to digest. So for us, like I wouldn't expect, nor do I have the assumption that like these things are going to come out tomorrow and they're all going to blossom or whatever. Because again, when you're really dealing with like net new stuff, this stuff takes a while to digest and really kind of get into the kind of ethos and become a trend and all that. But similar to you, it's kind of like something we've been paying a lot of attention to. I was going to ask if Ben was around, but I don't think he is. So I'm going to move on to his next question. All around governance. So as these protocols grow and mature, it's important that their governance systems are right. The first real governance instance I could remember being involved with, and again, I'm speaking as Ben, was the MakerDAO ecosystem back in 2019. And it seems like governance has gone through a lot of evolution since then. Which particular governance constructions do you think are beneficial today? And how are the Solana DeFi protocols deploying those governance systems, Maddie?
I don't know. I think that the governance side of DeFi in general is still very very new, and I don't see any kind of governance breakthroughs. As a on the founder side, when we were when we were thinking about protocol, we were thinking about like it has to be decentralized from the very beginning, and there has to be governance live, and it's even better from a regulatory perspective because like it's out of your hand at the moment and it's already a decentralized network. But I think that you need traction before you can have meaningful governance, and you need traction from people who actually understand those decisions. And then, when you go through some of the discords, you feel like, it's like, it's not there yet. So I'm not in favor in any specific, I would say governance mechanisms, but I'm in favor of developing better governance tools. So better governance UX. Because across different ecosystems, it's pretty bad. Like the snapshots on ETH, like it's too expensive. Like I don't know if you ever use like a Polkadot JS to vote. So it's I haven't seen like something that would like immediately click that this is it. But before we can have like great governance practice or best practices, we probably need better UX so that we can actually know what we like, and we can get more people involved in the governance, because that's important that you don't have probably obviously it cannot be 1,000 people every time on or maybe it can, depends on the traction, but I hope that we're going to see more of the experimentation and governance than we have so far, because I remember 2019 was supposed to be the year of governance and nothing material really happened. So again, I don't have any like good answers. I have very general kind of descriptions of what's happening, but I think that definitely a good UX is a kind of like a prerequisite for a good governance experimentation.
Yeah, I guess on my side for this question, maybe to answer with like two sort of stories, if you will. One of our portfolio companies, Sabre, has probably pushed the kind of most within the governance side, at least on Solana. They built a whole system called Tribeca DAO that kind of orchestrates this, has like a multi-sig attached to it with signers and gauge weight voting and all that. They did the typical path that you see a lot of other projects doing now with the whole VE governance model. So you can take your Sabre, lock it up. The longer you do it, the higher kind of multiplication you do get on the votes weight for ourselves. And then we ourselves are actually pretty active participants in this. So we actually took all the Saber that we own, locked it up for the max duration, which is 5 years possible, mostly just to show kind of support and put the real sort of stamp out there that like we in fact kind of are like long-term believers, and like we don't just say it, but like we'll actually do it, and we'll do it on chain, and we're happy to do so. Right now, like the major kind of voting things, it's all around like the gauge weight voting. So all the pools within Saber itself, you can kind of vote like what goes up and kind of down, and what the how each pool is incentivized. It is interesting that, I guess similar to the curve wars, the Saber wars, you actually are seeing participants of these pools recognize it. I won't say who, but we've had people who have a strong vested interest on certain pools DM and message me saying, hey, I'd really love your support in this, and like, can you please vote and all that. So this concept of people being strongly incentivized to want votes or want to vote on certain things, you are seeing play out already in a small scale. I think there's a lot more kind of to be done and played around with this, but like it's interesting already with like the kind of first version that they have. Like you are seeing some of the dynamics that they kind of predicted play out. The second, I guess, way to answer this is more from like a personal perspective. I guess, like I mentioned, I run this NFT sort of collector DAO and creator DAO called Playground. And we collect kind of NFT sort of mostly in the works of art, and also have artists who produce sort of works of art within the ecosystem. And so I myself, like I've had to set up the Discord group, and then we have verified channels, like we use Matrika to do all that. My biggest frustration, I guess, on the sort of governance, sort of creator participant side is I feel like right now all the governance systems are very heavyweight. You need to log in with your wallet. You need to vote with each NFT. Typically, if you're using squads or something, you have to do it one by one. You have to get like a 10% threshold versus it is so much far easier to just post a message in Discord, get like a thumbs up or thumbs down, get like a much broader participation from people who want to express their opinion, and then kind of go with that. It's definitely not as secure. It's not as on chain. It's not as anything, but more participation.
I think Synthetics
I think
was doing that. I think Synthetics was like the pioneer of this kind of Discord non-binding voting, but they were very kind of sticky votes, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. To your point, like I'd really love like more UX thought around the communication mediums and mechanisms that we use. Like for example, if somebody constructed a chat-based group around a wallet, you could actually tie in an emoji upvote to actually a signature. There's no necessarily reason why you couldn't do that. Again, I know right now like Discord doesn't really allow you to enable a bunch of this stuff, but I'd love to see more experimentation around the modality, the actual communication channels, the way we do this, not just trying to bolt on something afterwards, but really thinking of like where these discussions and why these discussions take place in the first place. Because right now, like things feel very clunky. And I'm assuming this is not just a pure Solana ecosystem. I'm assuming every project has to deal with this, but it feels like we're trying to tie together things that were not necessarily designed to be tied together. And that's actually like a big limiting factor of a lot of these governance votes too.
Yeah, I agree. And it's basically kind of expanded bad UX thesis.
Yep.
But I also think that there are other things, and the problem of like, when you say clunky, I immediately think, okay, it's heavyweight and it's fractured, as in you don't have any sort of comprehensive identity on chain, right? So that is a problem. If you could be this kind of persona that doesn't engages, and you can clearly see your sort of governance track record, like your wall of what you've done, that's definitely gives you a better experience and makes you kind of more want to participate, because there is some proof that you've done things. So I would say that this ties into the identity or Web3 identity problem, or how are we going to solve kind of I don't want to say decentralized identity problem, but kind of your sort of your Web3 persona and your user, like how do you manage your profiles? So these are, I think, also prerequisite to a sort of good governance turnout and people incentivized to discuss, to vote, and I mean, I would say more governance is being done kind of off chain by, as you said in the first example, lobbying, some kind of governance lobbying, right? Than actual kind of Web2 like experience of people clicking something that then is saved, and they know that they have the proof of that doing that they can show it to their peers and kind of get that tribe management vibe going. It's a question of status as well, right? So how can I prove my status? And if I can prove my status, I can, I'm more compelled to do something that sort of plays into that status. So yeah, I guess that needs to be built.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, like I totally empathize from a user perspective too. Like again, some of these groups, like I even me personally, like I don't have like a ton of time to like sit in Discord and chat and do all this stuff. Like I do it a lot, but like there's a lot of groups now, and so I totally emphasize if you're a completely net new user, you're thrown into a Discord group as your first experience. It is super confusing, man. You have all these threads going on. You don't really have context. You don't know a lot of the background. You don't know a lot of the backstory. Like it can be overwhelming. And even me myself, like I own a bunch of these NFT, type things. Like one of them being like the Monkey DAO, which is like a super active group or whatever. I don't personally have time, have like excessive free time to stay on top of every single vote coming out, all the context, how should I think about it, all this sort of stuff. So two things. One, we actually do have a portfolio company kind of working through this called Notify Network, doing a very sort of simple thing, giving you notifications around kind of base just governance things happening. One, here is this vote about to happen. Just want to notify you about it. And then two, here is the result of that vote. Here's actually what happened, and having that come to you kind of however you want it. Because even just communicatively staying on top of all these things is hard. And then two, maybe something I haven't seen so much is I'd really love even the ability to like proxy vote some of these things. Like I know there are certain people that I do trust that are really active and spend a ton of time, and like I probably trust them. I'd love to almost even take some of these NFTs or assets and say, hey, I want to actually proxy the vote to you, and like have you kind of help with the decision on this too. I guess if you're taking kind of real world traditional analogies in like the equity space, like the proxy sort of governance voting is a sort of a pretty kind of common structure where there's people who are really dedicated to kind of pick the right answers, and most of the other participants are really picking the people to kind of make the votes themselves.
Yep.
Cool. And then I guess since Ben is still not here, I guess I will go to his next question. It is still funny me being the trying to be the moderator, but let's see. The Solana ecosystem projects have gotten a lot of flack for poorly designed token distribution and economics. I guess one, do you think this is a valid statement? If so, do you have any sort of understanding or reasonings on why you think these distributions are so poorly constructed? And then how would you think to correct for the future and ensure new entrants don't make just the same mistakes that everybody else is kind of being criticized for?
Yeah, I think that there were instances, but there were instances in, I would say, in every ecosystem. Like Solana is not an exclusive. I mean, they had their wave of those projects, but I mean, let's go back to Polkastarter, right? Low float. That's how you do it. And definitely, this is probably like the biggest tell sign of when you're. I mean, obviously, not everyone is a say educated investor, but like distribution was very important to us as investors. And even after those things happening, so because I mean, perhaps Solana in the Solana ecosystem, this has happened in like the fourth quarter of last year, but we have seen this happening in the last 2 years, or even like the ICO mania. You had the same thing happening. Even like like guys as great as Gnosis had a terrible distribution method, and they know it. I mean, they kind of they know, and they have tried to kind of mitigate it. But I think that it's, to us as investors, very important when we'll tokens and the distribution to see some kind of logic to it. And it's not only about the percentages, but how do you, like, if you're distributing to community, do you go for a simple airdrop? Like, is that really a good way to go about things? I don't like freebies. And I actually, with the teams right now, there are teams in DeFi that are just coming up, and they're thinking about distribution in a very sort of productive way. And it's creating some kind of system where someone has to provide some sort of energy to obtain those tokens. So it's not just targeted because I've used this protocol, or I provided liquidity here, but it's more like, okay, I provided some liquidity. That's step one, but then step two is, okay, I got to earn that. So I got an option to buy, or I got an option to exercise, and do something more. So it's definitely not only about who's getting what, but also what kind of work they provided, because that kind of sets the tone for how hard the token is. Right, because if you just like giving up tokens and distributing it for nothing, then it's like it's not really a hard asset, for lack of a better word. So definitely has been done throughout history. I believe it is going to still happen in every single ecosystem. I see tokens distributions for projects that are raising right now, and some of them still suck, and I'm asking myself why. So I guess we're bound to repeat our mistakes, and I don't think that Solana has been the only ecosystem guilty of that. It's general.
Yeah, I think, Maddie, I agree with basically sort of everything you just said here. Again, I don't want to, not all projects are constructed equally. There's definitely some that are much worse in the spectrum, and some that are far better. Although the vast majority of things, at least like we've been involved with and have invested in, investors, are getting kind of rational-ish percentages, typically less than 15, usually less than 10%, with the vast majority kind of being set aside for the community itself. Usually a lot of the frustration comes in with a few of these projects that have done kind of more high-profile IDOs with very kind of low supply kind of being put in those IDO kind of bucket windows, which really kind of jack up the price in the beginning. Again, like to me, like I'm actually much more of similar to you, Maddie, I'm much more of a fan of distributing and giving value to the actual participants, not just people kind of chucking money into a pool, but actually trying to really use the token as a core incentivization mechanism for whatever the project's doing, and starting off far smaller and having far sort of longer lockups for even the investors themselves. Because for us, like, we should really care about the ultimate, penultimate value of these things. And for us, like, we always look at everything from a pure, fully diluted perspective. So I'm not trying to game like what the circulating is in the beginning and all that. Again, I can't say not all investors think like that. I can't say all projects do that, but at least the ones that we get involved with, like we try to really push the founders to think through this too, because this stuff matters, and your reputation and how this is perceived matters a lot. So I do think the Solana project could do a better job in this regard, and they should learn from the projects who are doing this better, not just taking the examples that are more sort of one-sided to them. And by the way, I guess the last one, I think Ross just messaged me saying to like wrap it up in like 5 minutes-ish. So maybe the last thing I'll just kind of cover is Solana Pay. We're just starting to scratch the surface of kind of real-world payments. The Solana Pay SDK just launched a few weeks ago. This feels like a really powerful kind of innovation at scale, kind of for merchants, for users in the e-commerce side. What are your quick thoughts on some of the Solana Pay stuff coming out? And then, yeah, I guess we'll start with you, Maddie, and then I can give kind of a super quick answer on that too.
Yeah, I think it's really excited when you can do something in real life, right? When you can real life as in you can go to. That's always exciting. It's funny that Terra had the reverse narrative of like they had the kind of the commerce, the with their stablecoin, and now they're building out their DeFi side, and Solana's going from the other side. So it's interesting, but I just can say it is really exciting, and hopefully we will be able to use that globally, and it's going to be as normal as your Apple Pay. So it's I'm really, and I think that if Solana will be really successful with that, we're gonna see other projects trying to go for it, other L1s. Although not sure how kind of fit they are for a solution. But yeah, it's interesting to compare Luna and Sol, like how sort of inverted this is.
Yeah, and it's cool. We actually are seeing a lot of crossover of developers in the Terra ecosystem and developers in the Solana ecosystem. You actually see a little bit more crossover and collaboration, and people kind of launching projects on vice versa. We actually, it's not announced yet, but we do have an investment within the Solana Pay and Terra ecosystem, kind of the concatenation of both of these. I personally think, to your point of like, what's the kind of unique value proposition, I think this can be one of those if nailed really correctly. It's a much better experience from the merchant side. They save 5% of all fees, sort of from tractions, no intermediaries. It's better from a user perspective. You're not going through existing banking rails. It's far simpler. So I would really love to see this work at scale. And I hope to see a lot of projects coming out of the hackathon that try to tackle this too. I guess keeping in mind time, maybe I guess I'll do the wrap up here. I think you guys wanted me to talk about Riptide at the end. So Riptide Solana Hackathon, it is coming up. It has 5 million in prizes, I believe. I'm going off their Twitter account, so hopefully I'm correct. Projects are due by March 17th. So solana.com/Riptide if you guys do want to participate. There'll be a whole bunch of judges. I'm one of those included. I'm assuming kind of Maddie, you are too. We'd love to sort of give feedback and kind of help out with anybody building anything in the ecosystem. We really care about all this stuff. So Maddie, thank you so much for spending the time. Sorry I had to be the moderator.
Thanks, man. You should get paid. You should be happy to run these. This was amazing.
Yes, and yeah, thank you guys, everybody, for listening. And sorry, we weren't also on the Twitch chat, so if you guys have any questions or whatever, feel free to just send any of us messages on Twitter, and we can kind of get to them as we can. So thank you, everybody, for the time.
Thanks.